Horror story. They always told us not to go near the well. It stood at the very edge of the village, hidden among the overgrown brambles and gnarled trees that no one ever ventured near. The well was ancient, its stones weathered and crumbling, half swallowed by moss and time. Even though I had lived in that village my whole life, I'd never seen anyone draw water from it. No one dared. We had newer wells, deeper ones, closer to the heart of the village, and that was where the villagers stayed. As for the old one, it was cursed, or so they said. It wasn't the well itself that scared people, it was the man inside it. At least that's what the elders called him. An old man trapped in the dark depths of the well, making sounds that chilled your blood if you strayed too close. Most people didn't talk about him openly, not unless they were telling some story to frighten the kids. But everyone knew. Every time someone wandered near that cursed spot, whether by accident or because they thought they could be brave, he made that sound. A long, low groaning that wasn't quite human, like something dying. Or worse, something that should have been dead but wasn't. The story had been passed down for as long as anyone could remember. The details varied depending on who you asked. Some said he was once a villager himself, cast into the well as punishment for unspeakable crimes. Others said he was a traveler, a stranger who had come to our village long ago and brought with him a darkness that the village had tried to bury in the well's deep waters. There were even those who whispered that he was no man at all, that he was something much older, much more terrible, that had always lived there long before the village had been built. But no one knew for sure. No one dared get close enough to find out. Except me. I hadn't always been curious about the well. Like everyone else, I grew up with the stories, the warnings. I avoided the place as if my life depended on it. But as I got older, that fear turned into something else. Curiosity, I guess. An itch in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite shake. What was down there? What made those noises? Surely it couldn't be a man, not after all this time. But if it wasn't a man, then what was it? It wasn't that I was particularly brave, just restless. I'd spent my whole life in the village, listening to the same tales, seeing the same faces, going through the same routines day after day. The well became something like a puzzle, a mystery that needed solving. And the more I thought about it, the more I found myself drawn to it, despite all the warnings. So one day, just before dusk, I made my way to the edge of the village. It was quiet as I walked, the kind of quiet that presses in on you, that makes every little sound seem louder than it should be. The trees, with their twisted branches, loomed overhead like silent sentinels. A cold wind picked up as I got closer, rustling the leaves and sending shivers down my spine. But I kept walking. I had to see it up close. The well sat just beyond the tree line, half hidden by shadows and creeping vines. Up close, it looked even older than I had imagined. The stones were worn smooth in places, jagged and broken in others. The well's mouth yawned open, a perfect circle of blackness that seemed to swallow the last light of the fading sun. I took a step closer, heart pounding, listening for the sound, the groaning that everyone had heard, the noise that kept them away. But all I heard was the wind and the distant rustling of leaves. The air was colder here, sharper, like the well was drawing all the warmth from the world around it. I took another step, my hand brushing the cold stone rim, and peered into the darkness. Nothing. Just endless, impenetrable black. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my breath coming in shallow gasps, waiting for something to happen. But the silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. Maybe the stories were wrong, I thought. Maybe there was no old man. Maybe it was all just a trick of the wind, a tale to scare children away from a dangerous, crumbling ruin. Then I heard it. A sound, soft at first, barely more than a whisper, but unmistakable. A low, guttural moan, rising up from the depths of the well. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, like something scraping against the very bones of the earth. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The sound grew louder, reverberating through the stones, until it seemed to fill the air around me, echoing in my skull. I took a step back, heart racing. My legs felt weak, but I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the darkness of the well, and the sound, the awful groaning sound, kept coming, relentless, rising and falling like the breath of some massive, unseen creature. I should have left. I should have run back to the village just like everyone else. But something held me there, something deep and primal, a curiosity I couldn't shake. What was making that noise? I had to know. I had to see. I edged closer again, despite the voice in my head screaming for me to turn back. My fingers gripped the rough stones of the well's edge as I leaned in, peering once more into the blackness. The sound shifted, changing. It wasn't a groan anymore. It was words, whispers. I couldn't make them out at first. They were too low, too distorted, like voices carried on the wind from a great distance. But as I strained to listen, the words grew clearer, forming just beneath the surface of that horrible moaning. Then it stopped. Dead silence. I stood there, every nerve in my body screaming, waiting for the next sound to come. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath shallow and quick. And then, in the stillness, I heard it. A voice, low and rasping, echoing up from the well's depths, whispering one word. My name. Thomas? I staggered back, nearly losing my footing, the blood draining from my face. My name. The voice had spoken my name. The air around me seemed to thicken, the cold seeping into my bones. For a moment, everything was still. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud and insistent. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. All I could do was stare into the well where that voice, that thing, had called me. Thomas? It came again, softer this time, but clearer. More insistent. I turned and ran. The branches tore at my skin as I bolted through the woods, the trees a blur of shadows around me. My breath came in ragged gasps, my heart thundering in my chest. I didn't stop until I was back at the edge of the village, panting, trembling, too terrified to look back. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Who would believe that the well, the man in the well, had spoken my name? But now I can't escape it. I hear it everywhere I go. In my dreams, in the silence of my room, in the wind that rattles the windows at night. The voice. His voice. And the worst part? I know he's waiting for me to come back. The voice haunted me. 4 days after that night, I couldn't think about anything else. The village went on as normal, people working, laughing, living their lives. But for me, everything had changed. I could hear it in my head, the rasping whisper that had crawled out of the darkness, the way it had twisted my name with such dreadful intimacy. Thomas? Followed me everywhere. In the dead of night, when the village slept, I would lie in bed, my heart pounding, listening for it. I heard it in the wind rattling the shutters, in the creaking of the old beams of my house. The voice. His voice. Always calling, always waiting. I tried to ignore it. Tried to push the fear away, to convince myself that it had all been some terrible dream or a trick of the wind. But I knew better. Deep down, I knew it had been real, and whatever had called my name from the well was still out there. Still waiting for me to return. And slowly, that terrible pull began to take hold of me again. At first, I resisted. I tried to go about my days as if nothing had happened. But each time I passed near the woods, my eyes would drift toward that cursed place. Toward the well. It was like it had a gravity of its own, drawing me closer and closer until I couldn't escape its pull. I would catch myself standing at the edge of the village, staring into the distance, my mind blank, my feet itching to move. To go back. By the end of the week, I couldn't fight it anymore. The sleepless nights, the whispers, the gnawing curiosity, it was too much. Something inside me snapped, and I knew I had to return to the well. The night I decided to go, the village was quiet, shrouded in the kind of deep fog that seemed to swallow the world whole. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the twisted trees at the edge of the forest. I grabbed my jacket, pulling it tight around my shoulders as I set out, my steps slow but determined. Each step closer to the well made my heart pound harder. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my palms slick with sweat, but I kept moving. The silence around me was oppressive, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. When I finally reached the clearing, the well stood there, just as it had before, silent, ancient, wrapped in the same eerie fog that clung to the trees. But this time something was different. The air was colder, sharper, and there was a strange pressure, like the very ground beneath me was waiting, poised on the edge of something terrible. I approached slowly, my feet crunching over dead leaves and brittle twigs. My eyes locked on the black, yawning mouth of the well, and my breath hitched in my throat. The same fear from before clawed at my insides, but this time, there was no turning back. I was already here. I stepped closer, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the well. The cold stone felt almost alive beneath my fingers, as though it pulsed with some dark energy. My heart raced, my breath shallow as I leaned forward, peering once again into the bottomless black. For a moment there was nothing. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses in on you, that makes you feel small and helpless like a child staring into the abyss. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, waiting for the sound that had haunted me since that night. And then it came. Thomas? The voice was clearer this time. Louder. It wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a rasping, guttural sound, rising from the depths of the well like something ancient and decayed. My heart froze, the blood draining from my face, but I couldn't move. I couldn't tear myself away. Thomas, the voice called again, and this time, there was no mistaking it. It was him. The man in the well. I know you, the voice croaked, each word dripping with malice. I know everything about you. A shiver ran down my spine, my mouth dry, but before I could speak, the voice continued. I've been waiting for you, for someone like you. My grip tightened on the edge of the well, knuckles white as I forced myself to respond. Who are you? The voice paused for a moment as though savoring the question. Then, with a long, wheezing breath, it began to speak. I was once a man, a long, long time ago. The voice rasped, echoing through the stones like a long-forgotten memory. I lived in this village. I had a family, a life, like any other man. As the voice spoke, images flashed in my mind, faded, disjointed memories of a life long past. I saw a small house nestled at the edge of the forest. I saw children playing, laughing, running through the fields. I saw a man tall and strong standing at the center of it all, watching over his family with pride. But then the images changed, darkened. The man was no longer smiling. But I was, cursed, the voice continued, growing darker, more twisted. I was given a gift, they said. The ability to know things, to see the truth. But the truth, oh, the truth is a terrible thing. The images in my mind shifted again, this time to something darker. I saw the man, him, standing alone in the woods, his face twisted with madness, his eyes hollow and black. I saw the villagers, whispering behind his back, watching him with fear and suspicion. They kept their distance, but he could see it in their eyes, their doubt, their hatred. I could see into their hearts, into their souls. The voice groaned as though the memory pained him. And they feared me for it. They called me mad. They said I was cursed, and so they threw me into the well, locked me away, left me to rot in the darkness. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my pulse loud in my ears. The well seemed to grow colder as the voice spoke, the darkness pressing in around me, suffocating. I tried to speak, to ask more, but the words caught in my throat. And now, the voice rasped, its tone changing, growing darker, more menacing. Now I wait. I wait for the one who will set me free. There was a pause, a long silence that seemed to stretch on forever. And then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. You are the one, Thomas. My breath caught in my throat and I stumbled back from the well, my heart racing. I didn't understand. How could I be the one? What did he mean? I wanted to run, to escape, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The voice echoed in my head, louder now, more insistent. You will take my place, it whispered, and I could hear the twisted smile in its voice. You will be the one to live in the darkness, to see the truth. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, I won't. But before I could finish, something cold and wet wrapped around my ankle. I gasped, looking down in horror as I saw tendrils of darkness, thick, black as tar, snaking up from the well, wrapping around my legs, pulling me toward the edge. I tried to scream, tried to fight, but the tendrils tightened, dragging me closer, inch by inch. The voice was laughing now, a cruel, rasping laugh that echoed in the night. It's over, Thomas. The words cut through the air like a knife, and with a violent tug, I was pulled off my feet, slamming hard against the stone rim of the well. My fingers clawed at the stones, desperate for a grip, but the darkness was too strong, too relentless. It pulled me closer, closer. And then, with a final wrenching pull, I was dragged into the well. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was the pale light of the moon, far above, slipping out of sight as the stones of the well closed around me. And then there was only the voice, laughing, and the cold, endless dark.